You're listening to Where We Fit, a podcast that shines a light on the unique paths and voices in the marketing and communications industry. This podcast is brought to you by the CCNY AAF student chapter. I'm Eggie, an ad PR senior, interested in creative and account management.
And I'm Monique. I am an ad PR and film and video production major. And we are here with our guest, Professor Javier Garcia, the Senior Director of the Instructional Design at the Ad Learning Exchange.
And educator extraordinaire, the only educator at CCNY that gives us a lifetime guarantee of help, which if you haven't taken advantage of it, just know that it is real. I have cashed that check many times and I just keep coming back for more information. Professor Garcia, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. And yes, that lifetime check does accrue interest, as you'll find over the course of your career. So thank you for having me, and thank you for taking the initiative and building this platform for not only for yourselves, but for your future guests as well.
Yeah, man. I think it's important because there's a lot of us with interlocking interest, and this gives us a great opportunity to really all come together and work, even if we are in different programs, because we do have some people that are in the video production programs, and we have some that are graphic designers, some sound engineers, and it's coming together really well. But our conversation today is going to be focused around communications industry, marketing, and the different paths and voices that exist in the industry. We have a lot of ground to cover in a short period of time, so I want to dive right into the first question, which is about you. I want to know how you made room for yourself in the industry and how you fit.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it requires a little bit of soul searching and looking back. Really, I think to sum it up in one word, it's probably curiosity. Now that I'm in the role of an educator, kind of understanding that learning never stops. Not just in our lives, but also in the communications industry. What I found, I got my break at City College. Folks who've known my story, heard it before. I was a City College student myself many, many moons ago. I graduated back in 2009, having studied at the Advertising and Public Relations program at CCNY that several of you all are in. And what I found was that, the program itself prepared me, perfectly for kind of the experience I was going to get in the industry. But at the same time, there were certain on the ground, sort of on the job sort of skills that I found, are really difficult to kind of translate into the classroom. And that's pretty much typical of any industry. So really having immersed myself in some really great clients right at the beginning of my career, I was able to kind of learn all of these skills that ultimately I knew I wanted to find a way to translate and give back into the classroom. But my time didn't come until many, many moons later. So having graduated at the beginning of 2010, worked for a number of years, I came back to City College, got into the master's program, the Branding and Integrated Communications program at CCNY. While I was working, which was a complete whirlwind. But I had the opportunity to work on some huge clients, LG, Dell, and then I kind of immersed myself in teaching after that. So having built this sort of portfolio of skill sets over the years, having worked in account management, having seen and worked for huge global brands and kind of understanding how they operate, I was committed to kind of figuring out how do I make sure that students who are going to eventually graduate from the program, just like I did, can find their footing into the industry with hopefully as little of a traumatic experience as possible, because it really is like diving into cold water. There's a huge cultural difference between what students experience at City College versus what they might experience in the industry. We always talk about how diversity is an issue, not just in terms of race, but also from walks of life, background, identity, in many different respects. And then of course there's skill sets, right? Some programs may be teaching certain things that our students at City College maybe don't get exposure to. And that was something I knew right out the gate that I wanted to find ways to minimize. So I'd say, the best way that I found my place in the industry was I stayed curious. I knew that the skills that I was going to get on the job were only going to prepare me to do that one job. And so I was a part of numerous competitions. I was, awarded a professional development grant early in my career, and so I was able to be a part of the 4As, the Institute of Advanced Advertising Studies program. I think like 2 years into my career, and we wound up pitching to clients from Google. And so we won that competition, and then I continued to mentor the following year. And so I just realized early on, it's like, you got to find what else is out there, right? I hate to say it, but like sometimes you'll go on interviews and people will say, well, what else do you do, right? Besides your academic career? Do you work? Do you volunteer? What else, right? So getting used to figuring out early on that I had to tell my story and help other people kind of build their skill sets in whatever ways I could. That's really the name of the game. It's about understanding that the more you know, the more you expose yourself to new experiences, and kind of immerse yourself in other cultures. That's really how you figure out where you belong, and that's what I hope to help other people do.
That's amazing. That it sounds like you had a really like full-fledged career, and your curiosity, it really showed through all of the advances that you had academically as well. What necessarily inspired you to kind of step into your role as a teacher, as an academic?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there was something in my gut. I've been blessed to have some really great teachers and professors over the years. Everyone from pre-K, kindergarten, all the way through to my professors at CCNY. These were people who found ways to nurture students and kind of contribute to them in ways that left a lasting impact. And they obviously kind of did that with me. At the same time, kind of knowing that, you know, I'd went through a whole bunch of struggles early in my career, just kind of learning, the ins and outs of this completely new way of living my life. I was a student my entire life up until that point. I honestly didn't have, I think I had like one internship experience my senior semester at CCNY, and that was it. And so it was kind of like, that was my first internship, my first job straight out of school. And I'm working for huge global brands now. Oh, like, is this a PG or PG-13 podcast? Like, what's our language restrictions here? Like,
we're gonna go PG-13.
we go okay.
So and a little NC-17, but
okay,
no
so like
crazy.
no violence, but like okay. So I was like, oh shit, I need to learn so much in order to like just thrive. So I worked my ass off between my last semester in school and like that first year. I was pulling like 50 hours a week, like no questions asked. I came in on weekends while I was an intern in my last semester at CCNY. So I knew how to hustle, and I knew that early on, and so I proved myself. And I think that's part of what I think, honestly, and in retrospect, was traumatic, straight up, right? I shouldn't have had to do that. But I think that if I can offer students the skills that they need so that they can immerse themselves and hit the ground running, I've done my job, right? I think I can also, in a way, attribute it to my parents and the work that they put in raising me and sacrifices that they made. I was born and raised in the projects. My dad worked as a bus driver, and he put 2 kids through school. And I went back and got my master's. I was lucky enough to pay for that on my own, but I saw how hard he worked in order to create opportunities for someone like me, and I had to pay it back forward. So the way I do it is I make people struggle a little bit less by making their lives that much easier. So it's paying it forward.
You mentioned earlier that you got into certain interviews, or that sometimes you find yourself in an interview and they'll ask you, well, what else do you do? So it kind of has to go beyond the resume, right? And in order to go beyond your resume, you have to go beyond the curriculum, right? Because CCNY is going to give you the foundation, but you have to build on that foundation. What resources are available right now that anyone in this room can go and take advantage of that can give them an answer to the what else will you do?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the what else do you do question starts within. So I think it's more like, what are you passionate about? What are you curious about? And what do you want to, what sort of side hustles or projects or things would you love to devote your talents toward? So I think before you even like dive into, knowledge resources and things of that nature, you gotta have a direction, right? And so one of the things as an educator I always try to advocate for is just doing a bit of soul searching while you're in the program, right? What do you find interesting? What kind of job might you be interested in? And then figuring out a pathway to get there. I mean, there are all sorts of tools and programs that you could be a part of. Lynda.com has a huge roster of programs and certifications and stuff like that. But if you don't really know what you want to do, like it's like you give somebody a toolbox and it's like, okay, well, what do I build with this, right? But if you know what you want to build, then you're like, okay, I need to go out. I got to get a screwdriver. I got to get this. I got to get that. And so you start to kind of build as you go. But I think, outside of that, it's also about looking at competitions, boot camps, all these other kinds of programs. The industry has a ton of them. But if you don't really know what kind of role you want to go for, you can just start applying everywhere and not really feel like you have that sense of direction. So I think it starts by having these conversations. And like, if you are in if you're in the AdPR program or if you're in some other kind of academic program, talk to your professors, talk to people who will help you understand where you should be applying yourself, because otherwise you're kind of just like, I'm going to throw myself at anyone that will take me. And that's not a good way to live your life generally.
And let me ask you something, because I know that when you were going through your career and you have all these different stops that you made, right? You made all these different stops, and at one point you decided, after you got out of the AdPR program, you decided, I need to go back to the big program, branded integrated communications. And what skill set did you have that helped you determine, hey, this is where I fit? I am an account manager. And then beyond that, I see myself being an educator. And then beyond that, I see myself being a leader in the industry. So what is the fundamental skill set that you had that made you say, okay, this is the position for me?
I was hungry, man. I was just hungry. Look, if I'm looking back now and trying to rationalize what my thought process was, I'd thrived quite a bit before I got into the big program. I was thrown into this huge global account, had to learn, the ins and outs of how the business worked. I'd gotten all this experience between, it was 2010 when I started working, and then, it was 2013, somewhere around there, where I started the big program. And so I'd already had 3 years of really great account management experience, thanks to Y&R, now VML Y&R. But what I realized jumping into that program was, I was coming at it from a place of knowledge. And that wasn't necessarily just knowledge that I'd be able to apply, in my coursework independently, but also working on teams and working with other people and getting to know other people. And so because before I joined the big program, I'd also been a part of the 4A's IAAS program, I'd gotten to know people from, a completely different set of walks of life, right? And I'd never known any of the people I wound up working with and wound up winning on that project with. And so I got excited. I got hungry. I was like, this is awesome. And, being a part of the big program, then I was able to again kind of borrow from the skill sets I'd acquired, like managing clients, working on teams, working across departments and account management. And when I found myself in the big program, I got to know a ton of people, made some new lifelong friends, and folks that I've also had the opportunity to work alongside. And then eventually, I found myself where I was like, okay, I'm on these great teams. I don't know if folks are familiar with the big program, but in the last year, you are part of 2 capstone experiences, right? And these are like huge group project pitches that are like the workshop class, but on steroids, right? And so I had the opportunity to work on some really incredible teams. And that's one of the things that excites me most now. It wasn't just my personal hunger, it was the opportunity to create something bigger than I could alone, and to borrow from the expertise and knowledge that other people had to share. I think that's one of the best opportunities that you can, be a part of, like the best kind of experiences that this industry has to offer. The creativity, the thought process, the research, being immersed in that sort of collaborative effort. And so I was able to do that with people from all over the world, right? City College, our big students are from every walk of life, every part of the country, every part of the world. and we got the opportunity to borrow from each other and learn from each other, and do some incredible work. So that's one of the things that I find most exciting. And I think, the value of diversity and the value of being able to be a part of that experience is just, you know, being able to grow into something bigger than you possibly could by yourself. Why would you want to be around people who look like you, think like you, and kind of kind of only it's like the whole saying of the sum is greater than the whole of its parts, right? And I think that's something that we embodied, and I find myself eager to be a part of. So
You touched on something that really struck a nerve with me, and it was the idea that you were in the AAA program, and even before you pursued the big program, you had a lot of experience, and you went out and you met a lot of people. And that was one thing that happened to me at One Creative Club. They have their networking event. Here are all the Black people, and and that was terrific. And it was terrific in the sense that at first, when you first get there, you're a little overwhelmed because it's like there's just so many stations and so many agencies and just so many people there, right? But as I kind of walk through, you can go with your personal resume and you can establish a connection with hiring people at these companies, right? So it's like they have their recruiters there. And some of the best advice that I got was that your next job is going to come from someone you know. In this industry, the best way for you to really get out there and find these entry-level positions, or find even just more senior positions, but you want to go out and actually meet people that work in the industry. And in order to do that, you need to be in those spaces. So I think that that's probably one of the biggest kernels that really just influenced me, right? So I love that you touched on that.
yeah, I think this industry is what's the saying? It's not what you know, it's who you know, right? And I think it's not. I think that's oversimplified, because if you know who you know, then you also know who you don't know, right? And so if you really try to like, yeah, I know, right? It's like, wait, what? Even I had that moment. I was like, what?
Yeah,
But
this turned into a Young Thug song right now. Like
yeah,
it's just, it's like, wait,
that's
what?
that's a spin-off from the podcast. But I think if you're that in tune with who's within your network, and you can leverage the people within your network to build connections outside of it. It's like the whole LinkedIn thing. It's like, here's your first layer of connections, and your second, and your third. And so it's about feeling a sense of ownership over the connections that you have, and knowing how that informs who you are as a person. So I mean, I go to those recruiting events, and like, I don't know that many people there. It's not like I'm, the biggest extrovert or anything by those means, but I know the role that I play. I know, what I know as a professional, and the experiences that I've had, and I know the value that I can bring to other people. So going to those events, like for the first couple of years of my career, I was like, oh man, this is overwhelming. And, it's still slightly overwhelming to me as an introvert, but at the same time, it's also about knowing that you, as someone who is full of knowledge, full of energy, full of hunger, you go into those kinds of moments, and you should be able to be your best self and present your best self. Things like imposter syndrome, it's so real, but at the same time, if you know what you've been through, what you've experienced, what projects you have under your belt, hopefully you'll be able to go into those kind of moments with full confidence, and potentially land some opportunities. So yeah, I think those kinds of events, the One Club, where all the Black people, I go to it every year. I was part of the virtual experience this year. Invaluable, because part of it is about getting the experience, but also getting the opportunity to connect with people who might be able to help you out. And that's the thing, when you go to those events, all those recruiters are there. I mean, maybe you'll meet one or two, or like having a bad day, and they're like, not the most receptive to your presence. But they are generally there to help you, and to help you land some opportunities. So really kind of, being able to jump into those sort of moments. Yeah, I think that's how you find places where you belong. Because honestly, you'll find that, some of those recruiters that are there, they walk the walk and talk the talk, and that's what you want to find.
Yeah, your ideology is really inspiring to me personally, especially what you said about meeting different people in different fields. Like, I'm in between two fields already, like film and advertising, and I meet two different types of people all the time. And, you know, it really, there's people like to create divides between industries, especially in communications, but there's really no such thing. I mean, like my like me being a part of this podcast, for example, like, you know, I came as like an outsider. And even though I'm a part of the ad PR program, I'm coming to you guys with outside experience, outside skills within the video production program. And it's been able to build something up to this level as it has. And you know, I understand what you meant when you said like you're just hungry, and like I'm running like on a never ending schedule, like with everything that I've got on my plate, but it's because like I want so many things and I want this success, and I'm hungry for it, and I love the industry that I'm at, you know, dealing with people who are creative and people who can communicate and build something that can inspire and motivate people. It's your ideology really like is inspiring to me. And what you mentioned about diversity, I mean, like living in New York City, it's the most diverse city in the world. How do you see us, like your students, fitting into the industry and creating more spaces where our voices can be heard overall?
Yeah. You raise an important point about, you know, we're all New Yorkers, I think, right? I'm born and raised New Yorker. I know that for sure. Um, we live with a kind of privilege
Yeah.
that we sometimes lose sight of. Because we have been immersed in around so many different types of cultures, it's very easy to lose sight of the fact that, you know, marginalization is a very real thing. And so even though you might be hungry, you might have the talent, you might have the knowledge and you know, the qualifications to get out there. It's still going to be tough. You have to find ways to make noise, and you have to know how to use your network to get you where you want to go. I think, you know, one of the things that we lose sight of is the fact that this marginalization is very much a cultural thing that's rooted in, especially American culture. And I think that when we understand the history of marginalization and how we all kind of, you know, either have some sort of privilege or, you know, the intersectionality that we exist within, that's the thing that makes it sometimes difficult to kind of break through. But I think, you know, when you own that as a strength and you hear about how a lot of professionals in this industry really latch onto their identity and kind of use that as part of the you know, unique value that they bring, that's what's going to get everyone, you know, from City College, CUNY, you know, from some sort of you know, unique background in that respect. I think that's a selling point. And I think that that's something that, you know, as a professor, as someone who, you know, is of marginalized identities, that I try to share with the rest of the world too. So I'm curious to think about, you know, how future generations find their place in this industry and find ways to really leverage that. And so, you know, despite the fact that we hear a lot of conversation about diversity, I think it's a bit of an uphill battle still. But you know, that's something that should only make you want to work that much harder. I know that winds up being the case for me in many respects too.
All right, so we reach that unavoidable point where we're gonna open the question to some. We're gonna open the forum to some questions from our audience, and I'm gonna just let whoever is editing this know. Please don't cut that part out because I think mistakes are the blocks of progression. So I want to leave that mistake in there forever. But we're gonna open the forum to some questions from the audience. And the first question that we got from the audience is, and this is gonna be a little, it's gonna be a little spicy, Garcia, depending on how you answer it, is which class in particular helped you best transition from student to ad professional? So this is your time to tell us which was your favorite class, the best class, and, you know, for kicks and giggles, who taught the class? They might still be at CCNY.
Oh, they are. So best class, favorite class, one that helped me transition into the industry. That's easy, the workshop class. That's there's no doubt about that. That's the crescendo. That's the big buildup. It's also the pressure cooker. That class. So many moons ago, I was taught by Professors Applebaum and Professor Tagg, and Professor Tagg is now the program director of the master's program, the big program. And they were a dream team. I mean, they're both incredible. But having had them as my last professor in the last semester of class, was absolutely brutal, like a dramatic level of brutal. I was working all-nighters. The day of the pitch, I worked all night. don't do it, right? One of the first things that I mentioned in my classes, like the first day of class, is always like, do as I say, not as I may have done in the past, right? Because there are things that you don't want to find yourself in that situation. You don't want to pull all-nighters. You don't want to necessarily be brutalized in that sense. But I will say, the amount of dedication that I had that last semester, again, I was interning, I was scared out of my mind, I was in the workshop class. I poured my heart and soul into that project. Obviously, in retrospect, it is a bit junior in what we produced, and very rough around the edges. But I built some lifelong bonds as a result of that with the folks I was working with. Whenever I talk about being in the trenches, that is what I'm talking about. Like really, just being in the mess together, and producing something that you can be proud of and think this exemplifies the best of our thinking, the best of our teamwork. It may have been at the expense of some other relationships in our team, and we may not have gotten along, but at the same time, I think the workshop class did a phenomenal job of helping me understand what I was about to embark on.
Amazing. I mean, now I'm excited for that class. Like,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah, I can't wait. Maybe like when I'm a senior, hopefully. How do you deal with challenges and setbacks in your career? Like, any advice on how to get out of a funk?
Oh yeah. Let's see. There's always a learning experience. There's always something to learn out of any sort of setback, any sort of difficulties you might have in your career, personal lives, whatever it might wind up being. I always try to remind myself at the moment, it's like, okay, this sucks right now, but at the same time, there's going to be value in it. And so if you're finding ways to kind of, not necessarily deny the fact that you're in some sort of moment that's kind of rough, whether it's a layoff or it's, you're struggling, working on a client or a team, there's always going to be ways that you can kind of find it as an opportunity to recenter yourself and, find your balance again. Because those wind up being moments that can launch you forward in ways that you couldn't possibly anticipate. So I think it's really just about knowing how to pause, knowing how to reflect, and really understand exactly where you are, where you're headed, and just being kind to yourself. Like sometimes, yeah, you'll get laid off, maybe you didn't get that job, or you're struggling in whatever sort of way. But you want to find ways to kind of remind yourself, things are rough enough as it is. You don't have to be tough on yourself too. And one of the lessons that I learned, and I learned this lesson like year 5 of my career, know how to ask for help, because we all have support systems that you would not believe would be glad to kind of jump in and help you out. You don't have to struggle with things on your own. You don't have to struggle in silence. And again, if for whatever reason we already have that bond, I'm happy to be someone who can be a resource and help people out. Even if you're watching this now and you're like, I'm in some kind of mess, like I'll probably be willing to help you. You'd be amazed at the lengths that people will go to help one another, especially if they feel like they have some sort of existing connection, or if helping someone is easy enough for them to do without going too far out of their way. So be kind to yourself and be kind to others, I guess.
And that's, unfortunately, we're out of time, because I could go on all night. I love kind of navigating around these areas. And one thing that is very important to me when navigating these areas is actionable items. And I want to run down a list of things that you said that really stood out to me. And these are the puzzle pieces that are going to help listeners find out where they fit. First and foremost, like you said, the most important, be kind. Second, you said know when to ask for help. And this is for the listener right now. I'm just running it down in case they want the executive brief. Know when to ask for help. Own your identity. And when you own your identity, make it a part of your value proposition and make some noise. And lastly, attend as many events as possible. Meet people in different fields and build online. Workshops, boot camps, lynda.com, training courses, YouTube Academy. Go out there and learn something. Is there anything I missed?
I just want to add to the last point. Yes, attend as many events as you can online, but at the same time, I want to give some credit and say, if an event that you want to happen doesn't exist, make it happen. Earlier this week, there was an event called Allyship in Action, which was founded right after the death of George Floyd, in response to the marketing communications industry, just kind of sitting on their hands and not doing anything about solving the diversity challenges. And so, if it doesn't exist, make it happen and make some noise, right? I think that's a perfect segue into the experience that we've launched here, and I'm excited to see where it goes, and hopefully, as painful as 2020 has been, I also think it's the beginning of some really remarkable change. So thank you for launching this platform here.
Yeah, thank you for leaving us on such a positive note. Wow. Professor Javier Garcia, thank you so much for giving us your time and giving us your insight and spreading your ideology. Thank you for everything you've done for this podcast and for the students in the Ad and PR program. This has been Where We Fit podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening, and tune in for the next episode. All right. Good night, guys.
Good night.
Peace, y'all.
See ya. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you guys for tuning in with Where We Fit, a podcast celebrating the unique paths and voices of the marketing and communications industry. Brought to you by the CCNY AAF Student Chapter. Make sure to follow us on our Instagram accounts for all the latest updates at Where We Fit Pod and at AAF City College. We'll see you in the next episode.